It's easy as gamers to fall in love with a particular type of game. And when this happens, we seem to understand absolutely everything. The main characters, the story, the hidden details, the lore, the Easter eggs, all the achievements, the most entertaining game modes, and the best ways to grind. Pretty much everything about the game itself, but you still know nothing. Gamers understand the final product, but they do not understand the process of how it got there. And this normally leads to gamers believing that they could do better than game developers when making a game or coming up with ideas, because that's what they think it is. They think that it's just an idea which has been developed. But that's not true. In the beginning, most developers don't have a clue what they're going to create. This is because game development does not follow a linear path from start to finish. It is constantly evolving as it goes through what is known as the iteration cycle. Developers will test different gameplay mechanics to find the fun, and they'll do this at a rapid pace, trying out loads of different game ideas within mere minutes. Now, of course, these are not full complete games. It's normally the case of using geometry within a game engine and coding very simple mechanics. The idea behind this is if you can find something which is fun in its normal plain state with there being no animations, absolutely nothing, it is bone dry, and it's still being fun for the player, then you're already onto a good idea. From there, the iteration cycle continues. It goes through this process over and over again as developers will implement mechanics, test them out, see if they're fun. If they are fun, they'll add them to the game. If they're not fun, they'll change them to make them fun, or they'll remove them completely. And this goes from the moment development starts all the way to the end. This normally follows an MDA framework, which stands for Mechanics, Dynamics, and Aesthetics. And this is the process in which developers go through at first. They focus on the mechanics, then they look at dynamics to see how those mechanics can be used in different ways, and then finally, that's when they start looking at the aesthetics. But what's interesting is gamers don't see it the same way. They look at aesthetics first, then dynamics, and then mechanics. And there's no better example of gamers seeing it this way than in September of 2022. That is when early gameplay of GTA 6 was leaked. The initial reaction from gamers was shock. They couldn't believe that this was leaked in the first place, but they also couldn't believe the look, the appalling state of GTA. Surely Rockstar have not been working on this for many years now, and for this to be the current work in progress. But that's because, yet again, they don't understand. Gamers look at the aesthetics first and not the process behind the development cycle. One positive from this major leak was that game developers from other studios did come out and reveal early gameplay footage of the games that they've worked on in the past. This is also just scratching the surface with what gamers really don't understand, because you also need to learn that a game is unlikely to be suited perfectly to your wants and desires. We see this quite a bit with competitive multiplayer games. In recent years, they've been bringing in skill-based matchmaking, and this goes against every hardcore player. Take a look at Call of Duty, for example. At some point, you would have seen one of the top competitive players or a content creator, an influencer, playing Call of Duty and then go off on a tangent to say that they miss old Call of Duty where there wasn't skill-based matchmaking. They can go into lobbies, absolutely destroy everyone, get the nuke, and end the game. This is fun for them. And if there was a game designed specifically for that type of player, that would be finding the fun. But when a game turns into a product and that product is set up in a business structure, with that business being backed by investors and shareholders, it forces CEOs and team leaders to make the game as open as possible for different types of audiences. So that even though the hardcore player has likely been there since the very beginning, they have an equal say compared to everyone else in the community, even those that have literally just picked up the game. But here's where the real problem lies. If the game company was there to cater to the hardcore players and allow skill-based matchmaking to not be a thing and let the best of the best go through and dominate every single lobby, it does lead to those that aren't so good, that are trying to get in, struggle from the very beginning. That becomes frustrating for them. they leave immediately. But now, because the player base is not increasing, in fact, it's doing the opposite, it's decreasing. The game makes less money, the investors are going to be pushing the company to focus on a new title which has a higher return on investment, and ultimately the hardcore players still lose out because now there is no player base and there is no future updates for that title. And unfortunately, in a lot of cases, game developers don't want to do this. They want to create games for as many people for them to enjoy. That's the thrill for most developers. But in some situations like this, it will lead to there being a lot of backlash from fans of the game who send death threats to the developers themselves, despite really creating a game that they would never have come across or been able to play if it wasn't for them in the first place. Similar to this, in games where they're not as competitive, maybe they're more linear, have updates several times per year, with those hardcore audiences, it's simply never enough. And this is because it's a lot easier to play through content than it is to create content. Now, there are tricks that developers will use to make the creation of content slightly easier. They will reuse mechanics after they've already been implemented, as well as reuse assets. And this is not a new thing. Those who have analyzed Super Mario will notice that the assets for the bush are the exact same but recolored version as the clouds. This is done for optimization but also efficiency. You don't want to have to create every asset individually, so in a lot of cases they get reused in places where players will simply not notice. In the development of Hellblade, the team at Ninja Theory took advantage of Vertex Paint. This allowed them to paint moss over already existing assets, whereas before they would need to recreate all of those assets individually. This technique allowed the team to create visuals worth of a AAA studio for a fraction of the normal required budget. But even still, sometimes it does go noticed. Gamers do realize. This happened with God of War. When Santa Monica Studios released the first trailer, many people noticed reused animations and assets from the first game. This created a large backlash in the community as they thought the developers were lazy. However, the fans forgot to realize how much new content the game had provided. It took 6 years for the team to create the first game, and God of War Ragnarok only took 2 years. This saved time, money, and resources so that the team can work on new experiences by looking for new mechanics whilst still having a solid foundation for the game that they're going to build upon. The production process is a tried and tested method that has helped many studios create memorable games that leave a lasting impact on players. From carefully crafting intricate levels to designing characters and weapons, the game development process requires a lot of planning, hard work, and dedication. And while it's natural to feel disappointed when your favorite feature is cut from a game or a leak doesn't live up to your expectations, it's important to remember that the goal is to create a game that will be enjoyed by the majority of players. After all, games are meant to be shared experiences that bring people together and create memories that last a lifetime. So the next time you're eagerly waiting for a game to be released, remember that the development team is working hard to make sure it's a game that you and millions of other gamers will love. If you enjoyed this video, then I highly recommend clicking our next video on screen. YouTube has selected it specifically for you. It is tailored for your needs and I'm sure you will love it. So click that video and we'll share everything that you need to know.